For today is Luke 12:13 through 21. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable: The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God." Can you please join me in
Would you pray with me, please? Lord, we ask that you would open our hearts and minds by the power of your Holy Spirit, that as your word is proclaimed, we may hear with joy what you have to say to us today. Amen. Some time back, and I don't know, maybe still now, there was a reality TV show called Hoarders. Has anybody ever seen that? Okay, so some of you have, and like I said, I don't know if it still airs today, or if it doesn't. I don't watch a lot of reality TV, and if I do get a chance to watch TV, Mike's usually watching Gunsmoke, so there's that. But I could tell you all about that. But nevertheless, the show tells the story of folks who live in houses packed from floor to ceiling with stuff. And a lot of that stuff is junk. And I know that to be true. When I worked in social services, I would often make home calls. And I would see homes where you could barely get a path through. It is a very sad, sad thing. And a great many of the items that folks hoard are quite useless. But to be fair, what I really want to say is that hoarding is a psychiatric illness. So it takes a great amount of care, and it's very difficult for folks to let go of anything. But nevertheless, this TV show, they talk about folks' problems, and so when they do that, there's always a psychological counselor on to help that person find the strength to let go, so to speak, of some of that clutter. And I suppose a part of the appeal to that show is that it kind of tricks you and I into being able to say, well, you know, at least it's not as bad as that in my garage or my house or my barn or my closet. So just being sensitive to that. We need to be sometimes careful, though, before we proclaim ourselves free from this hoarding behavior, because there's a plethora of ways that we can be hoarders. Have you ever bought new stuff to organize your old stuff to make room for new stuff? Done that? Do you often say, well, that's a really good box, and I might need that box later, so I'll keep a hold of it? You know, storage and container businesses, they make a living betting on that you and I will think that way. But there are other things that we can hold on to that don't always fall into that category of, well, the tangible items, such as having too many pairs of shoes. Maybe it's memories of times that we know will never come again. And the memories aren't bad memories, but what makes it difficult is we're unwilling to let them go so that we can move on. We can never have another good memory because we don't want to replace that good memory. Or that prized hopes and dreams of the future that maybe we now know, if we're honest, are not going to come to pass. But we still hold on to them because when we do, they can make, we feel like we have that future that we can still dream about instead of maybe redreaming. But when we hold on to that old stuff, well, then we're unable to experience the joy of today. If we're not allowed to let anything new in, it's kind of hard to experience the joy of today. You know, it's also possible that you can counter this persistent kind of envy, so much so that it becomes difficult to experience genuine happiness for another person's achievements or good fortunes. Well, what about me? That's not fair. Why does he always get a new truck and I don't? You know, I would have liked to have that, but I didn't get that. Sometimes we are so focused on ourselves that we can become hoarders of me, and I. I want, I need, I did, I hope, I achieved, I accomplished, I will. And oh, what about those poor me purchases? Anybody ever done that? You know, the ones that you go out and you do to make yourself feel better. Maybe you're sad or lonely or feeling empty or angry or whatever, and so you just want to feel better or feel something new, and so you go out and you buy something new, hoping that it will fill the hole, no matter how temporary that good feeling may be. You know, I call that mercy purchasing. I had to buy those pants because I just felt, you know, like I needed something. We all do that. We all go and sometimes buy things that we really don't need just to make ourselves feel better. Sometimes it's just to justify ourselves. Somebody told me one time, well, I had to buy that. I got a raise. I had to justify the raise. You needed a new car to justify your raise. Okay, you got that. Whatever floats your boat, but, you know. In all of this, though, it speaks to the fact that most of us, if we really dig deep, we can find some aspect of greed in our own lives. And I'm not judging, but I'm acknowledging that I, and maybe even you, can relate to this barn builder in today's gospel. Our text today comes with what I call one of Jesus' caution sticker emojis. Watch out. Be on guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And Jesus warns there's all kinds of greed. It could be tools, it could be shoes, lands, barns, sheds, money, or wealth, or any other tangible thing. But it can also be about power, control, being right, being in charge, hoarding our time, our attention, our approval, our love, or any other number of things. The real truth is greed isn't about these kinds of things. It's really a deeper issue, and the greed is just a symptom or the presenting issue sometimes of a deeper problem. Greed isn't really about the quantity of our possessions, but about the condition of our heart. Greed is how we deal with our insecurities and feelings of emptiness and self-worth, attribute value sometimes to ourselves. You know, we count our bank accounts or our stocks or whatever, and that tells us who we are. It's not about having as much in as much as it is about being enough. And when we believe that we are not enough, then that response is sometimes greed, to hoard our stuff or to withhold our love from others. Because after all, if I give too much of myself away, I may not have anything left for me. We use things in other people to fill the empty hole within us. Greed can, sometimes it's like, well, I don't really like that person, but they're the only person that likes me. Well, that's kind of greedy when you think about it. We use things and people. And greed convinces us that if we just have a little bit more, well, then we can take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Greed convinces us that we need bigger barns when our barns are already full. For example, we say, if I win the lottery, I'll be set for life. My future will be secure. Well, let me just say, as Methodists, our social principles say we don't play the lottery, but I know a lot of you do, and I'm not going to argue on that point. But the underlying issue, usually to something like that, or any kind of gambling, really, is that uncertainty and the unpredictability of life. We're uncertain about the future, or that there will be enough, or uncomfortable with what we do have, so that if we win these big winnings, then I'll be enough. If I can get more of your time or attention, then I'll feel wanted, I'll feel valued, I'll feel accepted, and I'll feel loved. And so we constantly vie for that attention. If I can gain more power and control, no one can hurt me, and so I'll be safe and valued. And Jesus says we are fools to let greed get the upper hand and convince us of who we are. You fool, Jesus says, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? If you don't give your love away and you die tonight, who gets it? Nobody. When greed uses those external things to deal with internal matters, it almost never works. It leaves us wanting more, always seeking the next dollar, the next thing, the next word of approval, and a new and a bigger barn. Greed steals and deprives us of what we want the most. And that doesn't mean that, our stuff, those things that we own or possess, are inherently wrong, but they can't be the remedy that defines who we are. The remedy to greed isn't necessarily always cleaning out the closet or giving away things. Sometimes it is. But the real work to be done is within us. It's an interior job. It's a soul work. It's learning to live in humility and poverty toward God. It is to be rich toward God. And that is the antidote to greed. That means we invest in each other, the world around us, in the same way which Jesus invested himself. And how did Jesus do that? Through love, mercy, grace, compassion, courage, hope, acceptance, truth, beauty, generosity, kindness, grace, the cross. This is the wealth of God. This is the life God shared and invested in us through Jesus Christ. So to be rich toward God begins with knowing that we are already God's beloved treasures. We are already God's beloved children. And that is where our worth lies, in that we are a child of God. There's freedom in that. It's the freedom to live richly toward others in the world because we know that we are God's child. It reveals that there is enough. It declares that my life is as important and valuable as yours, regardless of who you are. Your life is just as valuable as anybody else's, and don't let a bully tell you different. It removes that need to compare or judge ourselves or even others. Our being and our identity as a child of God takes precedent over what we can acquire. I can't help but wonder if greed might be might be at the core of so much of the political discord that goes on, the violence in the world today, the dysfunction and the hurt in the relationships that we sometimes have. To the degree that greed is present in our lives, it will rob us of God's wealth within us. If the boxes, shelves, and the closets of our lives are already full, then we often find that we have no need, desire, or even room for God. Sometimes, I don't have time for prayer. I don't have time for a Bible study. Or I don't have time to read my Bible. And sometimes we have to ask, what's getting in the way of that? And then search, is it greed? Is it someone else's greed? There are many things that can get in the way. I have to be careful about that because it's easy. You know, I like my prayer time, but man, I got things to do today. Maybe y'all just shorten it up. And you know what? I feel that when I do that. And it makes a difference. We say, this is what I do, you know. When our life becomes about me, myself, and I, we kind of say, you know, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and I will store my surplus. And I'll say to myself, you've plenty of grain laid up for many years, so take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Man, I said all my prayers yesterday, I'm good today. I went a little long yesterday, I'm good today. And when that happens, greed has robbed me and you of any possibility of us. When we believe there's only me, Jesus says, you know what? We're fools. The Message translation says, fool, that's what happens when you fill your barn with yourself and not with God. Take care, protect yourself against the least bit of greed. Life is not defined by what you have, even when you have a lot. Somewhere deep within, we already know this. I mean, I think we all know that deep within, we have what we need, and God provides for what we need. But we see this most often when there's been a real crisis, and maybe in somebody's life, or if you ever noticed during natural disasters like hurricanes or wildfires or floods. When reporters interview folks, what do you hear those people say? You know, when they're standing in front of what used to be their homes, well, they say things like, we lost everything, but we still have what? We still have each other. In those moments, with everything stripped away, that truth becomes undeniably clear. They're not thinking about their TVs and their cars and the size of their homes, or what they cling to is life, love, community, and faith. Life, love, community, and faith. That deep down truth that our worth isn't tied to our wealth, that rises to the surface not because it's new, but because it's always been there within us. We just sometimes forget amidst the noise of all the consumerism. We already know this, that moments of crisis can sometimes bring life into focus. So when Jesus says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, life does not consist in an abundance of possessions, he's not introducing some brand new concept. We've seen it proven over and over again. Whether through tragedy or clarity, life teaches us that our truest riches aren't stored in our closets, bank accounts, or titles. You know, I remember when my kids were teenagers, my oldest daughter started driving, God forbid. But she did. She started driving and she got a car. And like most of our teenagers do, she got in a wreck. And the first thing I said is, are you okay? What mattered not was her car. I could have cared less about my car. But what mattered was her. because the possession of a car is not what's important. We're finding the people that we love, the purpose we pursue, and the peace that comes from knowing that we are more than what we own. So Jesus is calling us not just to hear this truth, but to live like we believe it before life has to remind us the hard way. My husband also likes John Wayne movies, and as John Wayne said in, I think, the movie Hondo, we all get dead sometimes. We all get dead sometime. So when Jesus says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, and that our life doesn't consist in the abundance of our possessions, he's not scolding us. Jesus is waking us up. And he's pointing us back to what we already know, that our lives are measured not by square footage, investment portfolios, and what's in the driveway. When life runs short, disaster strikes, or when we finally take a moment to breathe and reflect, we know that what really matters can't be bought or sold. And if we already know this truth in the quiet corner of our hearts, then maybe, Jesus says, maybe we need to live that way. Not just when things fall apart, but every day in how we give, how we spend, and how we love. Because greed doesn't always show up as something loud and obvious. Sometimes it sneaks in subtly through discontent or comparing ourselves to others, or that quiet fear that will never be enough. And that's why Jesus says, be on guard. Not because wealth is evil, but because it's so easy to get distracted by it and forget what actually gives life its meaning. So today, let's remember, life does not consist in the abundance of our possessions. It consists in faith and gratitude, relationships, and in living open-handed before God. It is when we live by this truth that we have been touched by the richness of God and caught a glimpse of the treasure that we are to God and the treasure that God knows us to be. So as we approach this table today, and as we offer up